Hey guys, welcome to the Game Dev Discussion Podcast. This is episode 37, and this is the second iteration of the Studio Spotlight. Last week we had Anna Meacham on, Anna and a cinematic designer at Remedy. And the whole purpose of this spotlight is to allow me to speak to people at studios who are not necessarily artists, because the game industry is a big place, and it's good to shine a light on all aspects of the games industry. So this week we have, and I am so sorry, I'm going to say it now, Teemu Pellonpää, who is a senior producer at Remedy. Dude, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Yeah, can't complain.
I'm guessing, like, is it true, like, all producers are like super organised with their time, so like their home life is as organised as their work life, or do you get home and you're like, that's it, sack off being organised?
Yeah, I'm not. I've heard that some producers are like that. That this whole kind of production mentality goes to like every part of their entire lives. But for me, definitely the producer hat comes off when I get home, and yeah, I kind of stop organizing things very like consciously when I'm off duty.
Yeah, like artists art all day, and then they get home and they're just complete slobs. And it's like producers, they're organised and they've got everyone on track for everything, and then they get home and they're like, shit, I haven't made anything for dinner. I haven't got anything planned. Oh crap.
Yeah, that is a perfect example. The dinner, the bane of everyday life, figuring out what to do now.
So, producers, they make the games make the games happen. They keep things on track. Now, could we just start? I just want to sort of lay the ground rules and make sure we're all operating on the same sort of pretenses. Could you summarize for me what a producer is, and more specifically, it's easy for some people who don't understand the games industry to say, oh, producer, you mean they're just basically a project manager. Now, I feel like that's doing a producer disservice. So I'd like you to just summarize to me, what is a producer?
Right, so it's one of those roles that kind of varies quite a bit from company to company. But I think, like in a nutshell, it's a person who's responsible for ensuring that the project team is able to do their best possible work and finish the project on time and on budget. And hopefully at the end of it all, the team is also left healthy and happy.
That's quite an interesting bit. Sometimes gets missed stuff, isn't it? Like, oh yeah, we've got to make sure everyone gets everything done on time, but we don't also destroy our own staff.
Yeah, I was pretty particular about that point because I did a little research like before coming on, like how do like other companies describe the production role, and very often it was like a person who gets things done, person who finishes things, and I'm like, sure, that's definitely a part of it. It's a big part of it. But if you burn people out, if you get things done but people aren't happy, then you're not gonna have a very long career, I don't think.
How is that? Do you find that difficult to tread that line? Because obviously you're in that middle ground, really. Like, you're not sort of in the trenches making the artwork and like the animations and all this sort of stuff, but also you've got to like deal with probably the upper management and like the admin side of stuff. Do you find, is it hard treading that line of like looking after the people while also looking after the sort of product itself?
Yeah, I think you pretty quickly found what is the kind of the core challenge of being a producer, because you're definitely between like a rock and a hard place at all times.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of trying to figure out what does the management want, what does like all these moving parts want, and then what is actually best for the project and the people working on it. Like what actually ensures the best end result. And it's a very murky line. And the thing that makes it worse is that it's really, really hard to quantify, because it's part tech, it's part numbers, it's art, it's experience, how people feel about the thing. Mm-hmm. So kind of getting that confidence that you feel that you're making the right call and you're seeing the things from the right perspective can be super daunting, and it requires like quite a bit of experience before you feel comfortable trusting on your own judgment that this is definitely the way to go, because it can be at times pretty difficult to somehow illustrate it to people like why you think that way, because it can be such a nebulous, complex, big thing.
Mm-hmm. Is it quite hard to it's because it's weird, you think of a producer, like you have to be quite a people's person because the fundamental part of the job is dealing with people, but then also it's like you've got to be quite I don't want to say bullish isn't the right term, but like okay, I understand you're not happy about this decision, but unfortunately this is how it has to be because of X, Y, and Z. Is it true that you have to have that sort of, like, would you say that's a fair thing to say, or do you think it's you don't necessarily have to be like that. Because a lot of producers I've met, and this is in my limited experience, and also more in iGaming, which is a bit of a a traditional old boys club, bunch of old dudes. The producers tend to be very bullish and very straight up, and I have met producers who I haven't worked with, and I'm like, oh, you guys are like you're far more reasonable than I'd expect you to be. So do you think how important, how hard is it to balance that, the sort of being a person and treating people like people, also like you have got to, like I said, back yourself on a decision that you are doing the right thing for the over a long period of time?
Yeah, it can be pretty difficult, and I definitely agree. There are definitely a lot of producers out there who, you do have to be direct with people. Like, I don't want to lead anyone on. I don't want to say like half truths to kind of spare feelings. Like, even though like often being like a very empathic person, like I kind of want to go that way, like spare people's feelings and that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of like being able to like communicate like very honestly and very clearly to people. But I think it's kind of a lazy and sort of a cheap route to turn that into something so direct that it becomes sort of like mean, or because you can straddle the line. And I think like the most important part of that is to have like an actual real honest relationship with these people to begin with, like from the start, that they see you as a human and you see them as a human, and you both you have mutual respect for each other. So when you have that moment where you need to tell someone some bad news, and that it's the right call to make, but that person is not gonna be super happy about it. It helps so much when you have this established relationship with that person, that they know that they can trust you, and what you say, they know that you've given thought about, that you're not just doing this nilly-willy or trying to like save your own time or your own ass, that they can trust you, that this call you're making, at least like in your own mind, it is the best way to go. So kind of like cultivating that early relationship with people, that they can like trust you as a person, not just like as a producer, I think is super important. It makes those kind of tough conversations so much easier when there's already kind of this pre-existing understanding from both sides.
Yeah, I actually agree. I've always treated it as, I treat my colleagues, programmers, artists, anyone, as my friends, and I treat as you want the best for your friends. Not necessarily means you have to be nice to them or make them happy. You want the best for them, and if the best means that you have to go to a decision they're happy with, then exactly. I back that. However, I have heard a counterpoint, and I can see the validity in it, and I'm curious to get your take on it. And it's that when you establish that relationship with someone on a human level, it's very easy to make things more difficult than they need to be. And I've met people who treat it basically as they're intentionally distant, or they're intentionally black and white about things, because it means that it's purely business. There's no human interaction there, in terms of okay, we're making this bad decision, and you know what, it doesn't matter if you're upset with it, because that's just a decision. It's out of my hands, it's out of your hands, we're just going to do it. And their rationale was, when you become someone in a managerial role, expect to not be liked. That's what their point was, is that you're making the hard calls that is going to upset somebody, so be prepared to be the guy that's not liked. And if that's the case, then you know what, let's make this as easy as possible. And when they're doing their managerial stuff, they're like, it's black and white. It's not, there's no sort of friend, I don't want to say they're not friendly, because they are friendly, but they're not very empathetic. It's just like, here's a call, do it, don't care if you're upset by it, we're not going to have a debate about this or a conversation, you're doing it, we're done, I'm gone, I'm getting on to the next thing. And I can see the rationale in that. I can see like what line of thinking they're following, although I don't agree with it. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I understand where they're coming from. To me, mainly kind of trying to shift through what that is really all about. It looks like they're trying to make the job simpler for themselves.
Yes, yeah, that's 100%. They're very open about that as well. They are saying, I just want it easier for myself. I don't have that emotional responsibility.
Yeah, and with that, you're kind of ensuring from the beginning that you're not going to be liked. So then you're kind of sort of not going to be disappointed when you're not liked. Yeah, you create that feedback loop, but you're kind of distant, black and white, stern, command people. Well, yeah, you're probably not going to be the most popular guy. So you're kind of, I don't know, almost, it feels to me that you're kind of admitting defeat before the fight even begins.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that is sort of one way to win, to not even fight at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to me, like I can't make the distinction between like it's just business and then the kind of the human stuff is there on the side. It's one big thing. Like this is our lives. The calls that
Yes.
we make here, the things we do here affect our lives like massively. Like you can't deny that. So I think like I just personally feel very strongly that I need to be aware of that fact that the things that we do here do affect people's everyday lives, and not just themselves, but their family members, their friends. So I always, just for that reason, try to come from the place of empathy and kindness and try to understand them and like what this is going to mean for them.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that you need to be like too soft, that you're like avoiding talking about things.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't need to go into like that extreme. I think you can be clear and kind of chase the things that need to be chased,
Mm-hmm.
but still be a human being about it, basically.
Yeah, because you've hit on it. Like, well, my counter when I was told this, I was like, my counterpoint is we spend like a third of our lives together. Okay, yeah, granted,
Exactly.
when you move studio, you know, it changes, but one, reputation follows you.
Yep.
Especially in our industry, it's so small. Like I can't believe it. I've only really been properly active for the past couple of years, and I feel like I know lots of people already, and that's in a very short space of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I'm like, yeah, we spend like majority of our lives together. Like, Jesus, you want to spend the majority of your life the bad guy who doesn't, you know, oh, nothing affects me, everything rolls off my back.
Yeah.
I'm like, no humans like that don't care what you say. Like this stuff affects you, especially being a bad guy like that. You know, having a whole production team like, oh god, here comes so and so. You know, that will grate on you eventually. I feel like. But just moving on. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think it also makes you less effective in your job.
You think?
Yeah, because I think honestly, when you come with that kind of attitude to things, people kind of get used to it, and when then you try to convince someone of something, I think it's a much larger like barrier of entry for them to actually internalize and accept that information. So yeah, sure, they may not talk back to you. They technically are gonna go do the work, but most likely it's not gonna be as good or gonna come as in time as it would if you get them to agree with you or at least see your side of things.
Yeah, I remember listening to I can't remember who. I think it might have been either Gary Vee or Jordan Peterson. They made a really interesting point about having like debates and discussions, and I like the idea of someone who's good at discussions is everybody leaves the table really happy. There's no winners or losers. And I found that really interesting. Like, and that's what I mean. It's really hard to do in the work environment. But like, if two people come in with different ideas, for me, if we could leave the meeting room where we both agree and feel like we've came up with the best solution, rather than my idea lost and that idea won. Like, but yeah, that's a really difficult thing to have come across. I mean, is there anything like? Is there any? I don't know. I don't want to say mantras because it's not probably it glorifies it a bit. But is there anything you try to do when when you're having these sort of hard conversations? Is there anything in your head like a process you go through or any tips for people going through this? Because I think anything that you do, like, okay, yours is like magnified because it's your full-time thing is to go through and have these hard conversations.
Yeah.
But I mean, artists, programmers, everyone will have to do these type of hard conversations. I mean, is there any tips you have or like ways you think about having them that make it easier? That maybe someone can sort of go, oh yeah, Teemu mentioned it. He doesn't do this, and I could think about that going forward.
Well, I think one key thing is that what we kind of mentioned before is like the ability to like empathize with people, like being like not just with their emotions, but being like able to put your mentally in their shoes. Like, what does this like in actuality in everyday life is going to mean for them? Like, just having that moment before whatever conversation or meeting you're about to go into. Like trying to actually visualize yourself in their situation, in their job, in their work, like, and what is this gonna mean for them? And even if it's something that I'm feeling strongly about, it usually kind of softens my own emotions a little bit because it kind of makes me stop and just not just rethink the issue and the thing, but to examine it from a completely different perspective. And usually, like, just through that process, you're going to be able to figure out what are going to be the things that they need to hear. Like, what are things that are going to be important for them to hear from you, and then you're going to be able to bring those things up in the conversation.
Does that come quite naturally to you?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a natural ability for me. Like, on my own personal life, it sometimes can be even a bit of a burden that I can take the worries and problems of others on my own shoulders, like very kind of instinctively and naturally.
Mm-hmm.
But like in this production work environment, I think it works in my favor, definitely.
Do you think talking, mate, we'll get onto like the sort of senior role in a minute, but just like as a side note, do you think that in order to go far in this type of role, let's ignore like, you know, junior and mid-levels of producers, because I think if you train enough, you can sort of pick up them types of roles if you really work at it. Do you think the further you go in it, the more you need that natural element to it? 'Cause it sounds like to me that there's a lot of like personality quirks to yourself that are very inherent and natural to you, which makes you good at your job. Do you think that's a fairly, that's not an unreasonable statement, is it? That your personality is something that's going to play really harder to whether or not you can go really far in this type of role?
To an extent, maybe, but I think these things are learnable. They're not just, you're not like locked into a set personality. You can develop those things in yourself. Like as a counterpoint, like the more mechanical, technical, like the mathematical aspect of the job doesn't come naturally to me. It's something that I've really had to work on.
So could you explain some of that? What type of stuff is like technical, so to speak?
Well, just like understanding and internalizing kind of like the technical, the programming aspect of the job.
Right. Okay.
Because like as you kind of do more and you become like more of a senior producer, you kind of need to get out of your own box. You need to be able to see the bigger picture and understand what things mean. Like you don't need to learn how to code, but you need to be able to understand kind of like how that pipeline works and how these different kind of elements in it communicate with each other. And kind of that like that kind of very mathematical programming sort of thinking doesn't come naturally to me. I'm definitely more of like the artsy fartsy sort of person. So that's what I've had to kind of learn to make myself a more well-rounded, a better producer. And likewise, if there's another person for that, it's kind of like more empathetic, emotional, like psychological stuff is more difficult. It's something you can learn. And like as you do the job, you're gonna be more and more familiar with other departments, how they work, what their work looks like to them, and what kind of things those people go through when things get like rough in a production. And as you see that happen, you start to understand them more. And especially like if you make the conscious decision that I'm going to observe all these different departments, all these different people, I'm going to try and very consciously understand what's going on, like on a human level, you slowly start picking it up. And then before you know it, like you kind of have that stuff ingrained in your brain that, oh, like if this happens, then this and this will happen to these people, because you've been there, you've seen, you've kind of slowly increase kind of your circle of responsibility. So you can kind of get like more and more different viewpoints into what you're doing. And I think that really greatly helps you with empathizing with other people.
You know what? You just listening to what you've just said, I'm like, I actually have so much more sympathy for producers. I'm just thinking, so back on the first podcast I had Ben Wilson on, and one of the things we were speaking about is as 3D artists, it's very difficult for us to have conversations with people because the barrier of entry for a conversation about 3D art could be very difficult. If I start talking to a random person about procedural tech, about the draw calls of an engine, how do we optimize a shader to allow for less draw calls or less instructions, like the barrier of entry is really, really high. Now, it sounds like for me, listening to what you've just said, that you're kind of having to learn the barrier of entry dialogue for all these different roles, because you have to be able to understand their problems and, give out the pipelines and the instructions. You can't just regurgitate information. You have to sort of somewhat understand the jargon yourself. So I'm guessing that means then for art, for 3D, for characters, for lighting, for tech, for programming, even for admin, there's so much jargon in admin. You're having to actually understand all of that. That's fair to say, yeah?
Yeah, at least like on some level. Like of course you don't need to get into like the details of every little the entire thing, but it is extremely valuable to understand to at least like the base level of like how things affect other things And yeah, there's so much jargon, like different like specialized words that it is absolutely hard to kind of keep track of when you need to like learn them from like every department. But I think one pretty simple trick that I think is really great for every producer to understand is like, if you don't know, ask.
Yeah.
Because we're embarrassed to ask, because it may be even a word that you've heard like so many times. It's supposed to be a basic word. You're supposed to know this. And when someone throws it in, like the worst thing you can do is like nod and like, yeah, right. Like, yeah, I know what you mean. Like, just it's your job to make sure that there's no misunderstandings, that there's like things need to be clear. So even if it feels like a silly thing or a stupid question, like just take that role. You're that guy. Just ask it, because there even might be someone else in the room who doesn't know and they're too ashamed to ask them. You can, as a producer, you can be kind of that barrier for other people, that maybe if someone decides to ridicule you someone, then it'll be you, and then the other people in the room benefit that, okay, now we're all on the same page. We know what that word means, what we're talking about, like for real.
So you're having these type of conversations you're having in terms of production and stuff. I'm guessing that they're more with the team lead, so you have to be able to have this dialogue with a team lead. You're talking high level because you're not going to get into nitty gritty details because you need to just know the high level information. But it's interesting you say about to ask, because I've had experiences with not so much producers, more like higher management, but it's like you are using, because you're basically playing Chinese whispers almost, and that's not in a derogatory way. I mean, you're having to have a conversation with somebody, understand the problem, make an assumption about how you're going to solve the problem, and then go relay that information to someone else. Yeah. Now, when you say about, obviously understanding terminology and stuff, it's amazing how when you don't, I feel like you can get found out pretty quick. I can normally, like, having about 2 or 3 conversations with somebody, you could see how they react to certain dialogue. If they don't understand the word, you can sort of spot it pretty quickly, but no one really pulls. You can't exactly say, hey, do you even know what that word means? Because obviously that's rude. But you're playing that Chinese whispers, and then you, like, say, for example, you and a lead are having a conversation about something, talk to high management, and high management go, like, end up having a conversation with that lead, and you're like, no, that's not my problem whatsoever. That's completely different. It's like, I've seen that happen in production multiple times. And it's like, it's one of the things that I feel like when you have that producer tag, you are, I don't know, I think there's and I'm trying to think the best way about it, sounding condescending.
Go for it.
A authority, I suppose, is the best way to describe it. Where you should know, like you said, I should know this, I'm a producer, I should know this. And like you said, you guys are only human, and there's a lot of jargon to process. But it's just interesting to hear you say that, because I've seen it in practice multiple times over the years of just not understanding a particular word or a particular pipeline or what that pipeline means, and the repercussions of it normally lead to at least, like, a whole sprint being ruined.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so kind of the courage and the ability to, like, break things down to, like, their very, like, simple components. Like, it can sound very, like, complex and have a lot of, like, complicated words, but, like, pretty often you can condense it down, like, especially like if you're talking to an expert in that field, they're going to be able to condense it for you. So if you just have, like, any sort of, like, even if you think like you're basically understanding, it's like just very valuable to just walk it through with the person. Like, we've had this conversation about this complex topic, so let's roll back into the beginning. Can we chart, like, simple steps of what this is and what we've been talking about? And if at the end of the conversation, you and that expert in that field, you can, I don't know, look at a whiteboard where you have, like, maybe, I don't know, boxes where you've broken down the simple steps. If you both can look at each other, not, okay, we both get it, we're on the same page, then we're in a pretty good place already.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. It's something I try to do, is, like, when you explain a complex idea, is before you move on to the next point, the other person has to explain the idea to you, and you have to both agree with the explanation. And that's a really, it's funny, because when you try to do that, sometimes people think you're wasting time. But I think 80% of the time we've done something like that, we've pulled up on someone like, no, you haven't understood what I've said there. Let's backtrack. Yeah,
it can feel sometimes, again, silly. Like, okay, do we really need to? Like, I'm sure we understand. But, like, like you said, I would agree with that estimation. Like, 80% of the time, someone, when you're doing, like, kind of that condensed explanation of it, is like, no, that's actually not what I meant.
Yeah, and also, I mean, like I said, you're speaking to experts, and something I was told, like, when I'm giving, so I do, like, a lot of university talks, and the thing I found a lot of value in them is you have to sort of straighten out your own thinking, and you have to really understand something, because to explain something to a novice, and that's not to be rude to you, someone who doesn't understand the field, explain that to somebody, you need to really understand it yourself. And if you don't, because otherwise, if I explain a good example, I make procedural materials. Playing with rugby players for the past 10 years, and every time they go, "What's that like ball you're putting on Facebook or on Instagram?" and I have to explain it. And the first couple of times, it's a really choppy explanation, which they've left the conversation not understanding at all. But after 10 years of having to do that, I've got the explanation pretty much down to a point where like I could explain that to my mum, and she somewhat understand.
Yeah.
But until you could do that, I suppose you don't understand the thing very well if you can't condense it down to the basic form that someone who's not aware of the field can understand it.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah.
So I just want to talk about, and I hope you don't mind talking about this, so as a senior, for artists, I feel like it's quite a linear process. Going from a junior to a mid to a senior, them 3 steps, everything after that, it gets a bit shady, like bit grey. But them 3 steps are quite linear. It's quite, as an artist in that position, you know what you need to do pretty much every time. Firstly, what's the sort of difference you find between the producer role and then the senior producer role, fundamentally? I know it varies from studio to studio, but it's like in your case instance.
Yeah, it definitely varies a lot, but I think kind of the simplest way of putting it is that just like a mid-level producer, I think it's enough that if you understand the department or the departments that you're kind of responsible for running the production for, like if you understand their needs, their workflows, how their work affects others and how others' work affect them, and you're gonna be able to bring those departments as part of the greater the production process. Like that's like a mid-level producer. Like you can kind of have sort of like a limited area of responsibility, but you understand it well and deeply. But when you become like a senior, more of like a senior producer or lead producer or whatever kind of name you want to put on it, you need to be able to kind of take a step back and see it's kind of being able to predict further into the future and with more complexity. It's not just only about the project and the kind of the production process inside the project itself, but it's also what are the partners' needs, the publishers, the middleware, the outsourcing, the actor.
Okay, that's interesting. So you actually it's not so much that you're managing multiple parts of the project, is that you're thinking outside of the project, the stuff that's linked to the project.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of the scope of the issues that the person is able to visualize and internalize and track is just kind of different. It's kind of like if someone throws a stone into a pond, a producer can see where it hits and where the ripples are going, but a senior producer can see where the stone lands, where the ripples are going, and where the ripples are going to end up in.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I completely get what you mean. So yeah, you're sort of you're just abstracting the present and it's accuracy as well, I guess. I suppose that's a lot. Yeah. That's a big part of it, is experience as well, is being able to go, okay, I've seen what happens when this happens.
Yeah.
So this is what we're going to do to correct it, to anticipate when this happens.
Yeah.
Whereas a mid-level producer might have not had that experience of knowing what happens when something fucks up.
Yeah, and they need to kind of rely on their senior and lead producers to kind of then work together on figuring that stuff out.
So who manages the producer? So obviously with an art department, so say environment artists, there will be a lead environment artist who's in charge of the sort of the artist and the principal artist to help with the pipeline and the quality. What is the equivalent for a producer? Who is the one who handles, I don't know, reviews, your roles and responsibilities? What does that hierarchy look like?
Well, yeah, again, a lot of variance here from different companies, but it's pretty usual case is that there's a production manager, kind of on the highest level, that oversees all the productions that are going on in the company. Because it's pretty common these days to have multiple projects going on. So there's that singular person who's kind of responsible that all the different projects, whatever it's going on, that those are rolling, and they have the proper kind of the production methodologies and processes are they are as they should be, or how you feel that they should be. And then becomes kind of the lead project producer, often called an executive producer or just a lead producer. And they're just responsible for that singular project within the company. And then from there down, it's a senior producer, and then an associate producer, kind of then dispersed into the teams. So
it'd be kind of so just so I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, you have your executive producer, they're in charge of the game, and then you have your senior producers, making sure like you might have a couple of them, making sure that the three main elements of the game, for example, are working okay. You have producers managing, say, for example, the character animations and the character implementation, the tech programming engine, and so on, managing like the environment art. And then you have associate producers managing sort of the micro elements of them components. Is that like, am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good breakdown. Yeah, that's a pretty common setup, I think. Yeah.
And you think, in terms of like progression, you put it down to probably just experience and execution. Like with an artist, I suppose there's an element of, I don't want to say talent, but like the execution of the product is very tangible. I made a really nice character. This character is really good. You should be a senior because you can make really, really good characters really quickly. Now with producers, you haven't got a tangible product at the end to judge on. I don't feel like.
No.
So how are you guys? What are you judged on, and how does that progression look like? If someone's an associate producer, what's the criteria for me to go? Okay, I need to get better at, or I need to achieve X, Y, Z, in order to become a producer, or is it just experience? Finish this project and get this project out on time. Sorry, we just had a little freeze. So get the project out on time, and you're probably going to be on your way to moving up. Like, how does that look?
Yeah, I mean, it is a difficult thing to quantify. Like you said, that there is no concrete thing to look at. Like, that is a very beautiful production you made there. Like, there's nothing like that you can really look at.
That's a nice Jira board right there.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess it does depend a lot, but like, it's how did the project go, first of all? Where were there problems? Where were the problems? And kind of like, what is your take on like what caused those problems and how they could be maybe fixed in the future? And then it's like a lot of feedback from the people that you've been working with. Very often, like the leads of the departments that you're working with would be probably talk to, like, how did they feel about your performance? Were you helpful? Were you not good to work with? And then of course, kind of more senior producers working above you, like how did they see you performance? Like how quick were you react to things? How well were you able to like condense and deliver information, keep track of things, and that sort of stuff. But it's kind of hard not to do that kind of like by feel and kind of like just trying to talk to the people who've been kind of in the soup with you and like just see how they feel about like what you bring to the team, right?
I'm just curious, has there been any, and this isn't necessarily to do with you personally, and I don't know whether you're going to be able to talk about it or not, is there anything that like, and I'm not talking like, oh, I didn't like that guy, he was an asshole. Is there any small things where it's like, oh, yeah, he was good, but like did this little thing which made things a little bit difficult, which were like not intentional or malicious or anything like that, just, he could have done that better. Like, obviously you've been, you're a senior at this point, so you've been there and done it. Is there any little things you've seen, like when you have them conversations, them kind of retrospectives where you're looking back at a producer's performance? Is there anything you notice people say in the past where you're like, oh yeah, if you did this little thing differently, like that was kind of annoying, or that was that was made things a little bit difficult, just so that, and it's something that like when someone listens to this, they go, oh yeah, actually I'm doing that right now. Maybe I should think about correcting that.
Well, one thing that often comes back when giving feedback to producers about their performance is like how trustworthy people think that they are. Not like as a person, like are they going to steal or something, but like if someone tells them a problem, how much can they trust that problem is going to start moving forward? The worst thing that you can be like as a producer is to be like this black hole of tasks and no one really knows like what happens when they come to you with a problem. So that is probably like the most common thing, like that is highlighted like as positive things when talking about producers, like in teams and their actions, is like, yeah, it was great. Like when I came to this person with my problem, I knew that I could trust that it's gonna go somewhere. Like even if it's not gonna go to the result that you wanted, but you knew that the producer took their time, looked at it, tried to figure it out, and like communicated to you about it. So it's one of these like favorite buzzwords, communication. But I think that is definitely one of the big things, because like that is it's a pretty clear like kind of reflection like of yourself, is like how how people feel that they can communicate with you and how they feel that you communicate with them. Like if it feels that it's clear and it's transparent and it's open, that's always like a good thing, and it always comes up like in feedback.
That's actually, I've never heard it articulated like that as a trust thing. I trust to go to this person with my problem and that it will be dealt with, not necessarily resolved, but dealt with.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never actually heard it articulated, and I like that. That's a very interesting way of putting it, because I had known in the past, and I've worked with producers where you go with problems, and I mean, I've left studios and then problems are still there.
Yep.
So it's really nice to hear that, because I've never heard it articulated like that. What about like? I'm trying to. Okay, this is a very broad question. So I want to say college. So you've not gone to university yet.
Yeah, no,
you are interested in games, and you want to move into a producer role. You use your personality, everything. And I didn't think these people existed until recently, but they do.
Yeah.
People who want to be producers, they want to be project managers. They want to be the people to make the thing happen.
Yeah.
Now, I have an answer when an artist approaches me, and like, what should I do? And I'm like, make lots of art, and here's what you focus on. Participate in the community. Art communities are really like vivid places. Like, go be a part of it. Do the art station challenges. These are great things to do to help broaden your portfolio and understanding. I don't have an answer when I think about a producer. Like, what is the? I'm not sure, because the steps you could take to become a producer. What are the stuff you could do in your time outside of go to university and study business and management or something like that? What can I do to help make me more employable as a producer or an associate producer? That's probably a better example.
Well, I actually have the exact same answer as you do. Go get involved and do things. I think that is pretty much like the only way you can like just get the experience, like because it doesn't even need to be necessarily like video game related. Like, just do stuff, connect with people, make like I don't know, a mini festival in a bar, organize something, get involved with people, like get used to like creating art together with other people. Like, I don't remember quite many job interviews where anyone really had given that much thought or care of like what was the school that they were coming from or what their grades were or what. It's always, well, what have you done? Can you show what you've done? And of course, and I think it's always beneficial for a producer to have something that they can show, and that's something that they've done. Like even like try to do some art, try to do some modeling, give a world to like a little level designing. The tools are more accessible and easier than ever at this point. Yeah. So like, there's like very little excuse like not to go and at least dabble and try something out, try to create thing. Like, even if you're not trying to become like a level designer, you've decided that you want to be a producer, just open up Unity, try to make a level, try to make a 2D platformer. I don't know, go to a game jam, see what you can do. Like, just like, people are open. Like, if there's like a small like indie scene or whatever like in your town, even if you come in like, okay, I don't have like super a lot of skills, but I'm interested, I want to be a part of it, what can I do? Like, I'm sure people will be welcoming, and you can kind of start like carving out your niche and kind of your base experience, and that can kind of then inform you like what sort of producer you may want to be. Like, do you want to kind of produce more on the tech, the programming side? Do you want to produce more like art? You can kind of find out those sort of passions as you kind of do things and try out different stuff.
That's really interesting, because I think I don't want to trivialize it, so I just want to make sure I'm clear. So say I'm going to use me as an example right now. I set up the podcast, I organise the podcast, I get guests such as yourself on, and as of Friday we're basically having a Dynasty meetup. I've organised a venue with myself and Jeremy, and we've had some support from the team with the Dynasty Discord. But I've sort of been organising it, inviting people, make sure the venue's set, making sure we've got like merch to give away, liaising with ArtStation. If someone, so say for example, I applied for you, and on my CV I put, hey, I manage, let's say I don't do the podcast, say I manage a podcast and I make sure that there's guests every week, and that all the marketing material is always prepared every week, and make sure the community know about it, and I also organise these events. Is that the sort of thing where if you saw that on a CV for a producer role, you're like, oh, that's actually really applicable right now? Is that, am I understanding right?
Yeah, absolutely. That is actually almost my background, because I didn't always make games. I did like the school that I went to was more kind of like overall like entertainment production. Like it was like
Yeah.
music and films. Like there was like gaming courses as well. But like I went in initially thinking that I'm gonna be like a music producer.
Yeah.
So like in my time like in the school and kind of like outside of it, like my main interest that I was pushing was like music and music production. So I was doing, like I said, actually like small like music competitions, like mini festivals, stuff, so that sort of thing. So yeah, I had like some modding experience that I had like done things like in the kind of the gaming sphere, but the more like recent and the more like real work that I had done before I became like a production intern was very non-video gamey stuff. But it was things that required responsibility, being able to track schedules, wrangle up a lot of people, working with artists, and hey, those are kind of pretty much the building blocks of being a games producer right there.
That's actually really interesting. I didn't expect you to say that. I won't lie. I didn't think you'd class the sort of, for example, organising a meetup as something that, as a producer, I'd find that really interesting. And now you said it, I'm like, that makes perfect sense. I'm organising, and of course that makes sense. I'm just curious. Do you think this is true? We were talking about, who was it? There's a Discord with me and a few of the guys I've met over the year with Dynasty, and we were talking about how there's a difference between producers and artists from a career point of view. In that an artist, the older they get, the more they pigeonhole themselves. If I stay in games, for example, and I'm an environment artist, and I keep working to be an environment artist for the next 10 years, and I'm so in this box of, okay, I can only go for environment artist jobs because that's what I've done for 10 years, and that's it. You can't exactly just up and go to film. I can't up and go to TV. I can't up and go to ArchViz. Right. It's just not translatable because there's a very specific pipeline. And the counterpoint was, okay, yeah, great, you have like a real straightforward progression thing, but then with producers, your skills are basically and correct me if I'm wrong, but are basically translatable to almost any industry, because every industry needs people to manage stuff. Obviously there's nuances, like you said, you have to know jargon for the game, different sectors of games, but your core skill and your core value as a senior producer isn't in jargon, it's in your ability to manage. So does that mean if you wanted to say, God forbid, touch wood, you don't, Remedy closes up tomorrow. If you wanted to, you could up and go, I don't know, manage, a university. You know what I mean? Like that skill is translatable to go and, okay, I'm going to go be some sort of high level manager in education. I'm going to go be a high level manager in finance. Is it that translatable? And this is someone coming from pure ignorance. I don't know. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, I think it is. It does like depend on who you are as a person. Like, are you able to kind of, is your brain malleable enough that you're going to be able to like bring that new extra information into it? Because like, yeah, sure, the core stuff is very much shared and it's going to be useful. Like my experiences as a video games producer certainly would be useful as like in managing some sort of like aspect of film or TV.
Yeah.
But I would have to take like several steps back though and start a little bit more from the beginning, because there is an entirely new world of knowledge that I would have to not just understand but kind of internalize. But if you are the sort of person who's ready to take that jump and kind of take those steps backwards so that you can take more steps forward, yeah, then I can't see why not.
So you think it would be a case of it wouldn't be so straightforward as I want to go from being a senior producer on a game studio to being a senior producer of film? It's not that linear. No. Senior not to probably mid.
Yeah. We would. At least I would think that you would have to then go into a lot more junior position. Like maybe your trajectory like would be a little bit faster because you're gonna have a lot of like those other blocks already like in place. But yeah, I wouldn't definitely go like from a senior to another senior in a different kind of area. Which kind of you need. I think you just for your own mental health and like well-being, you would need to like take a couple of steps back, kind of build the knowledge again, like step by step, and so you can feel comfortable with the different elements.
Dude, I'm really glad like we've done this, because I'm like, there's a lot of stuff I had grey area. You know where you have like an idea about something, but I don't know. I haven't spoken to anyone to like give you a concrete answer. And I have my own producers in my studio I talk to, but hearing some of the ideas sort of affirmed by yourself is very reassuring. And also, I think there's going to be a lot of people listening to this who will probably help them work out what they want to do a little bit. Like I said, it's an area which I feel like there's not a spotlight on it. And this is the whole reason I've started these studio spotlights, is that I don't feel like a producer is a career. You know, like artists' careers are put on a bit of a pedestal. Their progression is very well documented because of portfolios and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, it's good to sort of have a producer on to sort of put that as a career path on a pedestal. It's like, hey, this is a really cool career path you could go down. But I always finish this sort of podcast off with this question, and I'm probably going to put you on the spot a little bit here. If you could speak to yourself, you know, at the beginning of your career, is there any advice? What would you say to yourself, advice-wise, going forward? If you could speak to yourself as a, you know, say, 16-year-old man.
Demand less of yourself. I think that was kind of a trap that I stepped into, like in the beginnings of my career. I thought that I needed to, like, much quicker understand much more and being able to do a lot more. Like, keep it simple. Keep the steps, like whatever it is that you do, try to keep things just like simple and manageable. Don't start burning yourself out or like blaming yourself like if you don't immediately understand something or you're not amazing at something. Like, just, you know, take it slow, understand things before you move forward.
I think that's going to be. I think a lot of people could probably do with hearing that, to be fair.
Yeah,
I think I still do that now.
Same.
But dude, I really appreciate coming on. I know taking up some really valuable time. I think this is going to be really useful to people listening. But yeah, dude, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was fun.
Does anyone listening? Today is the 15th of January. On Friday, which will be the 17th of January, we're having our first official meetup, the Dynasty meetup. It's in Nottingham. I'll leave in the description a link to the invite. Please come along. There's going to be loads of guys there. There's guys from Experience Points, from Decagon, Dynasty. Jeremy is going himself. So it'd be good to meet some of the community, say hello, get to know some faces. But yeah, Teemu, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, man.
All right, peace out, guys.